A big regulation section today. Virginia privacy law has taken top billing. Essentially a copy of Washington state's from last year, it's considered rather business friendly. It's expected to pass in a session concluding this month and has the governor's support. It's not the only one to come, with 6 other states currently examining legislation. Maryland's big tech tax law passed, as I mentioned last week, and it's already being sued. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce and groups like the Internet Association, which makes up Amazon, Facebook, and Google among others, is taking it on. Meanwhile, on the right to repair front, 14 states are exploring legislation. Here's your list: New Jersey, Delaware, Florida, Massachusetts, Maryland, Montana, Nebraska, Oklahoma, New Hampshire, New York, Oregon, South Carolina, Vermont, and Washington. France has another angle: a repairability index. Last month, makers of certain electronic devices have to tell consumers how repairable the products are. The repairability index includes criteria like how easy the product is to take apart and spare parts availability. Fines come next year, and some companies are already releasing scores. And let's talk Prop 22 in California and the fallout. 2 articles I want to highlight. First, Bloomberg highlighting how more industries are being impacted by the changes to gig workers. Grocery delivery workers being fired and replaced by DoorDash workers on demand, or an op-ed by an Uber investor who thinks Prop 22 could be used to replace employees in industries from nursing to agriculture. The second is a Verge piece about how all of those companies, Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, Instacart, and Postmates, have all raised prices after promising not to in their campaign to support Prop 22. And how do I know this is a thing? The information is reported that Microsoft is building a freelancer market to take on Upwork and Fiverr based on LinkedIn. So why do we care? Well, first off, let me observe the Wall Street Journal also has a piece about how restaurants and startups are looking to their own apps and tools to solve their delivery needs. With me thinking about e-commerce a lot, see Sunday's editorial, that's another piece of the puzzle and an opportunity. If you think gig workers aren't in the IT services space, you're not watching. Companies like Field Nation are delivering this service already. I'm not endorsing the approach, I'm simply saying I can see building an IT services company leveraging gig workers too. Microsoft sounds like they're experimenting with delivering white-collar workers by leveraging LinkedIn, and that's smart. I get that idea. This whole section is like a fire hose of challenges and opportunities. Right to repair? Yep, that'll change the market. Taxes on internet advertising? Yep. New privacy laws? Check. Gig economy? Check. So listeners, which should I be unpacking more? New data from Newspire on Q4 malware and exploits. It's up 58 and 68% respectively. During weeks 9 and 10, ransomware jumped by 10,000%. Yes, that's the number. Here's their other findings. The large spike in exploit activity was driven by a December burst of SMB login brute force attempts, peaking at 90,000%. However, double pulsar reigned as the top utilized technique through 2020. VBA agent activity dominated all other witness malware activity. Attackers leveraged moments in time, utilizing voter registration, how to vote during the pandemic, and polling information, and other election-related materials to lure end users into interacting with their malicious documents. Attackers increased attempts to exploit new vulnerabilities as they were disclosed in Q4. This escalation was driven by the release of known vulnerability in over 49,000 Fortinet devices on the dark web and APT groups. Also reported, a new piece of Mac malware. Found across 30,000 Macs, infected machines call home once an hour, and the payload is still unknown. It runs on the M1 chip, and it's the second malware to do so. Finally, at least the skills are in demand. The Bureau of Labor Statistics says security jobs are going to be in demand through 2029. Why do we care? Might sound like a bit of a broken record, but it's always about the data on how smart the attackers are that interests me. Attacking specific moments in time and topics in the media is strategic and smart. Repetition does not spoil the prayer. Need a reminder? That's it. They innovate too, M1 malware already. I'm not sure all this job security is necessarily a good thing. We're still not improving. Every so often, one of my themes continues to just deliver. Let's talk broadband infrastructure again. Axios rounds up the movement happening on regulation. Congress has $3.2 billion devoted to broadband in the COVID-19 relief bill passed in December, and the House Energy and Commerce Committee advanced $7.6 billion for students and teachers who don't have access. This on top of the previously reported FCC investment in updating the maps. But also on trend, the states are moving. Nebraska, Texas, and Ohio all have 2021 initiatives, and 34 states took some actions in 2020. Seeing the writing on the wall, Comcast is pushing back their data cap rollout again, now to 2022. Over on the wireless side, The Verge gives us a roundup of the state of play. With phones expected to generally be 5G enabled this year, the networks are not nearly as far along. And those industrial options are even further behind, particularly due to standardization issues. So why do we care? If you're dismissive of regulation, I remind you that businesses make decisions because of it. Comcast is making their moves based on reactions to government and public sentiment both. Everything accelerated, and so did the move to make broadband a utility. Governments are recognizing it, and we'll see moves at the state level accelerate too. That's the COVID accelerant. We care because it should open up more opportunities. The tech battle in Australia continues to advance as Facebook has announced plans to lift the ban on news. This after a discussion between Mark Zuckerberg and the Australian Treasurer. Meanwhile, Microsoft is backing an effort in Europe to force tech companies to pay for the right to link news articles. The company is directly citing the Australian moves as inspiration to mandate paying for using content. While not related to these political moves, BuzzFeed is reporting that Mark Zuckerberg personally stepped in to make changes to Facebook's 2019 ban on Alex Jones in order to make it more lenient over the recommendations of employees. So why do we care? Let's observe that the issue here is link sharing. Fundamentally, do you have to pay for link sharing? It's a slight oversimplification, but it's a key part too. Tim Berners-Lee, creator of the web, highlights how that makes the internet unworkable. I'm not taking a side on this one because it's two bad options, although I recognize this space needs to change. When Zuck alone makes the calls, that's too much power in one man's hands. The Silicon Valley Leadership Group was announced last month with a 25 by 25 initiative. What's that? It's a pledge to boost diversity in their leadership by 25% by the year 2025. The update this week is the companies that have signed on. Facebook, Twitter, Zoom, and Western Digital are all some of the tech-related ones. The list is more expansive than just tech. Quoting MarketWatch, companies that take the pledge commit that at least 25% of their leadership will be individuals from underrepresented groups, people of color and women, by 2025, or that by 2025 they will see at least a 25% boost in underrepresented executives in leadership roles. The companies are expected to publicize their diversity data and annual progress toward the goal, although those goals will look different depending on the levels of leadership companies decide will be covered by the initiative. Also quoting the piece, McKinsey have found companies with ethnically diverse executive teams are 36% more likely to achieve above-average profitability, with that number being 25% for executive teams with gender diversity. Another study by Boston Consulting Group found diverse management teams have 19% higher revenues. So why do we care? With a mantra of you can't manage what you don't measure, this is why I produced the quarterly IT Leadership Diversity Report, which comes out next month. Self-reporting is great, and then in aggregate, we see how this shapes up. The short answer? The research says investing here causes business results. The corollary is that by not doing this, businesses fall behind. Targets are good. Now we measure them over time. Tech Isle with new data on the shift to business outcome-based, customer success-driven pricing. In 2017, 11% of small businesses and 14% of mid-market preferred the model. In 2021, that's doubled, 22% and 28% respectively. How about opinions of managed services pricing? SMBs prefer transitioning to a company-wide fixed recurring fee to take uncertainty out of the picture versus per device or per user. 29% of SMBs prefer incentive pricing tied to performance levels guaranteed by the provider. 78% want to work with suppliers who, quote, can connect business challenges with technology and design, architect, deploy, and manage technology solutions that deliver business outcomes, end quote. Oh, and only 9% are helping customers drive innovation. So let's compare against new CompTIA data around help desk trends. It's a split in their survey set. 46% are using both internal and external resources, 49% using exclusively internal, and only 5% exclusively using external. Those help desks are using chat software in 52% of cases, and the overwhelming use case for artificial intelligence is classifying or routing requests. The number one metric for effectiveness? Customer satisfaction. Finally, tying this together, 2/3 of senior execs plan to increase investment in automation and AI per a McKinsey study. About 20 to 25% of the workforce in advanced economies could work from home between 3 to 5 days a week. And the study believes 70% of time in the computer-based office work area could be spent working remotely without losing effectiveness. So why do we care? I'm pulling together several sources here for a complete picture. Let's tell that story. Customers are increasingly measuring success by business outcomes. They aren't keen on per user or per device pricing. They aren't getting a lot on the innovation front. 95% of the sample group have internal resources, which they are generally happy with many using AI and chatbots successfully to serve customers. And the landscape for support they will be supporting is changing fast to heavily distributed. Let's challenge an idea. How viable is the fully outsourced IT operation when IT becomes a core requirement? I'm not saying managed services is dead. Instead, long live managed services, where components or parts are done in conjunction with the internal resources, and everything is measured by the business outcome. The trend is back into business consultants, moving into the business layer to drive those outcomes. We see it here all in the data. Microsoft announced several new cloud offerings specifically for industry verticals. The company is focusing on financial services, manufacturing, and nonprofits as new offerings, and updating its healthcare cloud in April and previewing a retail offering in March. As the piece from CIO Dive highlights, AWS, Google, IBM, and several others also have per-sector clouds as well. There's a quote from the global leader of industry solutions at Google Cloud in this article that struck me. Quote, "We want to definitely be a cloud provider, but we want to be a business solutions provider as well. We don't want to be an IT provider from infrastructure. We want to be able to really help our customers move forward." End quote. Here's the other quote from Microsoft on the blog. Quote, "We work with industry-leading independent software vendors and system integrators to ensure our customers have the solutions they need to address their business challenges." End quote. Why do we care? Notably absent from the Microsoft quotes is IT service providers, because they aren't necessary in this model. Couple that with the Google approach, we want to be the business solutions provider as well. This isn't meant to be a gloomy episode. It's instead to focus on where the opportunity really is, which is in the business layer. If you aren't playing in the business layer for your customers, you're going to be washed away. I'm not saying this happens instantly or today or even tomorrow. Then again, you don't see the change in the water on a tsunami either until it sweeps you away. Want to ask, why do we care? T-shirts, stickers, t-shirts, water bottles, and even aprons. Pick up some of our great stuff at the link in the description below and support the show directly. Wow, regulation roundups again are the thing. That prediction I made about 2021 and regulation, I'm proven to be right faster than I thought. Net neutrality is being upheld in California as a judge has ruled to decline the telecom industry the injunction it requested. The case is not over, but the law can go into effect. And the judge doesn't think the industry will win. The DOJ has previously dropped its own lawsuit, so this was the last major obstacle to the law. And while we're at it, Australia passed the News Media and Digital Platforms Mandatory Bargaining Code. Now, Google and Facebook are required to negotiate licensing agreements with publishers for news articles on their search and feeds. The law is currently designed to target those too, but could be expanded, quote, where fundamental bargaining power imbalances with Australian news businesses emerge, end quote. And amendments to the law mean that the government can take into account agreements a company may have had previously. The EU has given their nod to agreement to data sharing with the UK in adequacy decisions. While still pending approval of the EU governments, this allows data sharing between the EU and UK since Brexit. Finally, the Biden administration has signed an executive order to look into the global semiconductor supply chain and review computer chips, large capacity batteries, and others. So why do we care? Who knew we'd learn so quickly about supply chains? Plus, this segment has something for just about every region. I feel like this is 3 for 4 on government moves. I'm pro net neutrality, particularly with my belief of broadband as a utility. The why is that it opens up markets for services. The EU and UK agreeing on a data standard at least keeps things from getting complicated fast for providers there and keeps the status quo. GDPR stays in place. Finally, we clearly have issues with the supply chain, so at least looking should help. As for Australia, a bad law to handle a problem poorly that needs to be addressed, and the EU is likely to follow. News you can use. Stanford researchers now telling us why Zoom fatigue is real. There's 4 causes. Excessive amounts of close-up eye contact is highly intense. Seeing yourself in video chats in real time is fatiguing. Video chats reduce our usual mobility, and the cognitive load is higher in video chats. Each has a simple solution. First, take the platform out of full screen and make the size that is designed to make the size of someone's face relative to the distance they should appear. Second, turn off self-view. Third, think more about the room layout for video conferencing. And finally, do give yourself an audio break, including not looking at the screen and listening only. The researchers note that social norms are created over time. Think elevators, and should you look at one another, a norm that was established over their usage. So why do we care? Where many stories lately feel strategic, this is super tactical. Here's data and information you can take in your own organizations and your customers right away. This is business education stuff, and it's about making the technology useful now. How you use the technology is more important than having it, and these are researched reactions and understandings to make it more effective. I'm actually going to be giving some thought to my own office to be able to do calls and presentations a little differently. This one for those dealing with the government. Gartner is forecasting an increase in global government spending in 2021. How much? 5.1% from 2020. IT services will be up 5.4%, software 9.2%, and telecom services 5.1%. Those numbers are all improvements from last year. Why do we care? I know some listeners are here in the government space, so here's your market data, and it certainly seems like 2021 will trend upward. Although the numbers are not dramatically better than last year. Good news still. This week in SolarWinds, Microsoft revealed late last week that they've completed their analysis and found no evidence hackers abused their systems or products. The hackers did make off with code, small subsets of Azure, Intune, and Exchange. Microsoft has also released the toolkit the company developed to find the malware in its own code for use for free. Channel Futures explores how some of the Microsoft investigation concluded rather quickly, and potentially being self-serving. I've included a link to the piece for those perspectives. The Biden administration has made a call for countries to come together to shape the rules of the road on cybersecurity and tech issues, particularly as they relate to China and Russia. On Tuesday, the Senate Intelligence Committee heard testimony from SolarWinds, Microsoft, FireEye, and CrowdStrike. Microsoft's Brad Smith called for, quote, a clear, consistent disclosure obligation on the private sector, noting that the company was not legally required to publicly disclose that they had been breached. Amazon was invited to attend, but refused, despite AWS being used in the attack. Also of note, Smith cited this as a multi-decade attack using more than 1,000 engineers. SolarWinds CEO offered that liability protections for sharing information about incidents would be helpful, although Chair Senator Warner stated he did not want to forgive sloppy behavior. It was revealed on Thursday by AWS that the hackers used Amazon Elastic Compute Cloud as a purchased server, and did so via multiple service providers. SolarWinds itself is investing up to $25 million in security, as revealed in their quarterly investor call. The company beat their Seeking Alpha estimates in revenue for Q4 and have taken to a quarter-by-quarter forecast due to the breach. Finally, as Congress reviews the security situation broadly, there are calls for a cyber ambassador in the State Department. The idea is a liaison to foreign officials, federal agencies, and private companies. Why do we care? I'm a bit skeptical of a cyber ambassador, but you can see in the hearings that we're headed towards some kind of notification and collaboration requirements. Microsoft and FireEye both asked for it specifically. Let's dwell here for a moment. Sharing information is a very positive approach and critical to moving forward. Think industry sharing organizations. Putting a set of minimum requirements and appropriate protections is the role of regulators. Then you layer on the industry sharing piece. As Senator Warner highlighted, we cannot protect sloppy operators at any level, but we also have to have guidelines. Microsoft, in my view, is being pretty open. That's not dismissive of the cybersecurity experts who have some valid points. Let's just compare to Amazon, who isn't even bothering to show up. Which do you really want? Unless the industry is allowed to disarm at the same time and create a space for that conversation, it won't happen. That's all due to liability. Google's Sidewalk Labs project in Portland, Oregon to build out a smart city has been shelved. This follows a similar project end in Toronto last year. The reason for the ending? The company was unwilling to share the level of detail required by the city in data. Why do we care? Is the technology not viable, or are the privacy concerns too much? Maybe a bit of yes here. I highlight this story because the really hard part is the privacy and data management, not the technology. I have every confidence the tech works or will work. I have a lot less confidence that the frameworks are in place, which leads to the next story. The National Security Agency has issued their information sheet with instructions for defense agencies and contractors on how to build a zero-trust network architecture. The agency is urging the Defense Department and contractors to move to this model. Why do we care? So, need help? It's a 7-page document that's a reference architecture. It's not a lot. This is a simple set of guidance to start. Here's your weekend homework. The document is out there. Link in the show notes. Thanks for tuning in to This Week in the Business of Tech. Shows come out each week, pulling together the daily podcast. If you like this show, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. The content here is possible because of supporters like you. If you want access to shows early, answers to your questions, and private interactions, join our Patreon. It's pay what you want. You decide what the content is worth. Join at patreon.com/MSPradio. Patreons also get access to the written versions of every story as they come out. If you want the stories right away, you can get them on the daily podcast. Find The Business of Tech on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your shows. Subscribe links at businessof.tech, and I'll talk to you again next week.